Years ago, it was chapter 6 that led to my understanding of Isaiah's timeline. I asked a simple question. Why did Isaiah put his calling as a prophet in chapter 6 instead of at the beginning of his book? Chronologically, this is the first event that happens in his book, but he didn't mention it until chapter 6. Why? The answer I felt I received in the temple was also simple, because that's when it will happen. I understood that Isaiah was using his call as a prophet as a type of something to happen in the last days, the calling of a great latter-day servant. From this, I also understood that Isaiah was using many of his early chapters as a timeline for the last days, as he placed those chapters in the order in which they will happen, not in the order in which they did happen. Before that moment, I had no idea why Nephi had inserted his long block of Isaiah in 2 Nephi. But now I knew that these chapters, 2 through 14, are a great gift to us if we understand why they are there. And I know that at least some of us will understand why they're there, because as Nephi predicts, the prophecies of Isaiah shall be of great worth unto them in the last days, for in that day shall they understand them. In his timeline, Isaiah is prophesying of the calling of a latter-day servant who will be called up to God's throne as Isaiah was. There, he will see angels and converse with Christ. And it's interesting that Isaiah's call as a prophet echoes perfectly the premortal Christ's calling as God's future Son on earth and Redeemer of the world. When the premortal Christ was called, God said, "Whom shall I send?" And one answered like unto the Son of Man, "Here am I, send me." Likewise, when Isaiah was called, we see nearly the same words. Also I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" Then I said, "Here am I, send me." No doubt the servant of Christ will also be willing to say, "Here am I, send me." The calling forth of this man, whom Christ calls an ensign, will actually follow the rising up of a counterfeit ensign, an antichrist who will gather an army that will make war on the saints and destroy Babylon in the last days. But this true ensign and those who follow him will have the final victory. In many ways, this righteous man, this servant of Christ, will also personify Israel. Just as the daughters of Zion will be purged of their sins by the spirit of burning, so this man too will be purged by burning, which is exemplified by a live coal in verses 6 and 7. Also, the Lord actually refers to this man as his servant, Israel. This servant will be like Isaiah in many ways. Just as Isaiah was told that his words would not be understood until the cities be wasted and the land be utterly desolate, this latter-day servant's words will also be misconstrued and disbelieved until his land is also utterly desolate, which will, ironically, finally prove the truth of his prophecies, even to the staunchest of unbelievers. Not only will this man be a servant of Christ, he will also be a messenger to unstop the ears of the deaf and open the eyes of the blind concerning the Lord's works. As Jehovah said of him, "I will send my servant unto you who are blind, yea, a messenger to open the eyes of the blind and unstop the ears of the deaf. And they shall be made perfect, notwithstanding their blindness, if they will hearken unto the messenger, the Lord's servant." Anciently, Isaiah deliberately made his words difficult to understand. So difficult, in fact, that even covenant people would close their eyes and shut their ears to them. But in the last days, the Lord's servant will open the eyes of the blind and unstop the ears of the deaf, allowing the Lord's prophecies to be fully understood. When this man is anointed by God and set apart by proper priesthood authority on earth, we should be careful, indeed humble, in judging him and his words. Why? Because his words may seem strange to us at first. Just as Isaiah was disbelieved and rejected for his words, so this servant will be disbelieved and rejected and even marred for his. Throughout his book, Isaiah speaks often of this servant. And even the Lord speaks of this man at some length. Clearly, he is one whom we should watch for and be willing to follow when the time comes. For even as Isaiah lived in a time of wars and internal purging, so will Christ's servant, who will lead the righteous through a latter-day furnace of affliction, just as we will see in Isaiah's timeline of events. All of this is explained in greater detail in the book, The Words of Isaiah. I'm Curtis Taylor with The Words of Isaiah.